today I'm delighted to be joined by Chad Johnson, who's Senior VP of Sales and Service at the Jacksonville Jaguars and also Chief Content Officer. So Chad, thank you so much for being with us today. It'd be great if you could just start off telling us all a bit about yourself, your career journey to date, and any standout moments.
Yeah, so I started in sports in the United States back in 1999, actually. I started working for a hockey team, a National Hockey League team called the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I started out in the sales and marketing world, selling tickets at the time for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So my career has actually kept me in the state of Florida for 21 seasons now. I went from the Tampa Bay Lightning to the Florida Panthers in the National Hockey League. I made that transition in 2003-04, which was the year the Tampa Bay Lightning won the Stanley Cup, the NHL's prize trophy. From 2003 and 4 to 2010, I worked for the Florida Panthers. And then I moved to Miami and worked for the Miami Marlins and opened up their new ballpark, which opened in April of 2012. So I worked on a construction site for a couple years as the building was getting open and was really tasked with selling that beautiful new facility. They opened on April 4th of 2012 against the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team. I happened to bump into the former president of the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team, Mark Lamping, who is currently the president of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he had come into the game to watch the two clubs and had told me he had just taken the president's job of the Jacksonville Jaguars on April 5th, the very next day after opening that facility, I accepted a role here at the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I've been here in the state of Florida now, working for 4 different sports teams across 3 different leagues, not for any specific reason staying in Florida, but I've now been here in Jacksonville, and this has been my longest tenure. I worked for a company called Legends. You all may know Legends in the UK as well as the United States. Legends was started by a company, the Dallas Cowboys and New York Yankees. And so I was a consultant, which is why I was bouncing around quite a bit. When I came to Jacksonville, I came as a Legends consultant, and I had a 2-year consulting deal with the Jaguars to help reshape their sales and marketing efforts. And at the end of that 2-year contract, I left Legends and stayed on with the Jaguars as a full-time employee. So I'm now a Jacksonville Jaguars employee and no longer working in the consulting space, but my peers and colleagues at Legends do quite a bit over in the UK and quite a bit here, and I know we have a lot of mutual contacts.
Yeah, exactly. So now you're full on working for the team. What are your objectives for the medium and short term?
Yeah, so Jacksonville's a unique market. We're one of the smallest markets in the NFL from a population standpoint. We have a very challenging market in that over half the people that live in Jacksonville are not from Jacksonville. So although they may be an NFL fan, the Jaguars may not be their first team, their favorite team. We might be their second team. Very similar to football in the UK, you're born a fan sometimes, right? You are born and your support is handed to you at birth. So here we have a challenge in that market that we're small. We have a lot of people that aren't from here that may not be Jaguar fans first. So we have to do things a little bit differently than other markets. The cost of acquisition of obtaining a fan or a supporter in Jacksonville is many times greater than another market. If I lose a fan, it's harder for me to replace that fan than, say, a market like Chicago or New York or others. So we've had to think creatively about our business. How do we connect with our fans? How do we create a different experience for them than they might see in other markets? And that's been our focus. And if you look at our stadium, that could be a great example here. We have the world's largest outdoor scoreboards. Our scoreboards are 362 feet long which is actually longer than the football field itself. We invested in that to create a digital experience for our fans that is unlike anything else. In our stadium, we have 2 swimming pools. You can literally sit in a swimming pool and watch the football game live. In our stadium, we have a dog park. You can bring your dog to the game and put them in the dog park that has swimming pools and playground, and your dog is being cared for while you're watching the football game. So our strategy here has been to create unique experiences and then really be on the forefront of data, analytics, and technology. The world of sports has changed. We've been a little bit slower to get into the world of data and analytics and strategy as compared to other industries. And when I arrived in Jacksonville in 2012, my objective was data. Data, capture data, know more people, know more about the people. And everyone was going through that. Well, today the world's changed. I heard a great leader say, we are now drowning in data, but thirsting for insight. And that's the evolution we're going through today. So over the last couple years, all of my efforts and resources have been into the insight of that data to make it actionable so that we then can do those different things we talked about of creating the experiences for our fans.
And then, so obviously it would be remiss not to talk about what's going on globally at the minute with the pandemic. So, how has COVID affected, not only what you do on a day-to-day basis, but preparing for sort of getting fans back in the stadiums?
Yeah, so when COVID hit in March here in the United States was when our first real outbreak happened, and live events started shutting down in mid-March here in the United States. From that moment forward, we had a singular focus, which was welcoming fans back. Every business was going through multiple scenario plannings. We did not have a scenario A and a scenario B and a scenario C. We had a scenario 1A, 1B, 1C, and it was all geared for welcoming fans back. So from the very minute COVID started, we started working with our local government, the state government in Florida, as to what those protocols would be to welcoming fans back safely and at the right time. And I'm happy to say that we were able to do so last Sunday. The Jacksonville Jaguars played the Indianapolis Colts, and on that Sunday, there were 13 NFL games being played, and only one that had fans in their stands, and that was here in Jacksonville. So we were the only game that day, and up till now, we've been one of only 2 teams total that have been able to welcome fans back. So we've had to think about things differently, safety, security, investments. We've had to think about how we reach our fans. How do we talk and communicate with them? How do we educate them more than anything else on the safety protocols that we've gone through so that they feel safe coming? And what we learned is there are fans that want to come back to live sport, but they also have to be willing to come back. And in order to be willing, you have to feel safe, you have to feel confident. And so we've had to change our messaging quite a bit. However, we also have taken the approach of, let's make sure every investment in a COVID environment is something that can bring a longer customer service opportunity for our fans and have a longer shelf life that can carry on in a post-COVID world and provide a great resource. So what I say is, I think that the COVID scenario, the COVID pandemic may have sped up the decision process to do some of these things that we may have already been considering, but we knew that they would have a long shelf life. And some of the things we'll talk about, like our partnership with Tappit and some of our technology, those conversations were taking place pre-COVID. They didn't start when the virus outbreak happened here in the United States. The conversations were already happening because the technology and the investment were the right midterm and long-term play, as you mentioned. But COVID maybe just sped up my approval process or my appetite to get that technology integrated right away.
So obviously, that was, as you mentioned, you guys are working now with the UK company Tappit. So I can only imagine how vitally important it is to have contactless technologies, no matter, in what ilk it is now. So, but perhaps you can just tell us a bit about the partnership with Tappit and this whole contactless mobile payment technology that you're using.
Yes. So Shad Khan, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, also owns the Fulham Football Club, and I've been spending, as we discussed previously, 5 years coming to London and working with the Fulham Football Club and traveling, and there are things that we share our practices here in the United States with the UK, and there are things I learned from live sport in the UK that I bring here. And in London, I noticed that you all were very well ahead of where we are in the United States as far as contactless payment and some of those things. And that's what piqued my interest, was initially my time spent in London and seeing some of the things you all were doing that we weren't. We invested in the COVID environment and trying to create a contactless experience for our fans. Another area that I felt the UK was well ahead of us in is your access control, your entry into the facilities, your ticket scanning process and getting in. So we have invested in some of that technology to allow fans to enter the facility in a contactless way. We have invested with our partnership in Tappit to create what's called Jags Pay, which is a contactless payment solution in our stadium. And the first conversation there was that it's a great experience for our fans to have a contactless payment option. But again, it was pre-COVID, so it wasn't critical. It became critical in COVID. But it also was a partnership that allowed me to understand our fans' behaviors. So everyone's trying to solve for who's actually in the stadium. Here in the United States, we're a little bit different in that many times someone buys 6 tickets on their account, and I don't know who the other 5 people they're attending the game are. So with a mobile payment solution, I can see that Katie bought a hot dog in my stadium, but Katie doesn't have a ticket under her name. She's a prospect I should go after because she's obviously in my stadium. So it helped me to understand who is in the stadium. It also helped me to understand your purchase behaviors. What do you buy? Where do you buy it? When do you buy it? So I can see, are you moving around the stadium? Are you doing different things? And as you know, here with American football, our fans are moving about the stadium. They're eating and drinking differently than when you're playing football in Europe, where you're in your seat, you're watching the play, and then at halftime you go get your pint. So for me to understand their behaviors, it allows me to be relevant in my communication with them so that I don't serve Katie a chicken tenders special offer when you've never purchased a chicken tender in our stadium. So I can really customize your experience and know that, hey, at the second quarter, you always get a pint from the concession stand at 104 and make sure that I have that ready for you. So that was really the genesis of the Tappit partnership. COVID really made me sign off on it quickly because now it added that safety and security measure. And then we went one step further after Tappit, and we invested in technology that will actually allow you to order your food and beverage from your seat. So while I'm sitting watching the game, I can order that pint. I can pay for it through Jags Pay, go grab my food without ever having to have a contact with, another human being.
So, as you're saying there, we have seen a major shift change in technology usage brought about predominantly by COVID and, this need. But how do you foresee the whole sort of sector needing to evolve post-pandemic, especially when it comes to technology?
Yeah, so as we touched on, that Jags Pay through Tappit and that mobile ordering from your seat, those are great customer service benefits that will live on forever. You know, even in a post-COVID environment, that convenience will be a benefit to our fans. And therefore, they're going to become used to it and expect it. And I'm seeing that with myself and my other behaviors. When I go out to a restaurant, if I can't scan a QR code and pay for my bill at the end of my meal, and the waiter has to bring me a paper, receipt, put my card in the machine. If I don't have that experience, I'm disappointed now. So I've almost become expecting the contactless environment. I've become expecting some of those measures to take place. And so in our stadium, we're making sure that everything we do does have that longer shelf life. I think everyone will start to see that evolve. And there are teams that are not welcoming fans back yet. And they may be waiting. They may decide that I'm not going to welcome fans back until there's a vaccine. And if that's 6 months from now or whenever it is, well, if I'm a fan that came to a Jacksonville Jaguars game and experienced those technologies and changes, but then went to another sporting venue to see another team play, and because they didn't open as early as we did, they didn't make those investments, I will feel that their experience is inferior to mine because I got to do this here. And so I think other venues are going to have to keep up with what some of the early adapters are doing here in this environment. And the great thing about Tappit, the great thing about some of those investments is they're the ones that are going to provide me the insight. Just having the data, Katie, of what they're doing and all that is only valuable if I have the time and bandwidth to understand it, decide what it means, make it actionable, communicate it to them, and then execute. Well, partners like Tappit are doing the back-end insight as well. So they're not just selling me the product, they're selling me the insight. And that's what's invaluable to me, because that's how I can stay engaged with our fans.
And obviously you said, you were the first NFL team to actually welcome fans back to the stadium. And I know you now have just announced that you're also going to have your first live music event since the pandemic. So, what lessons learned from sort of last weekend's game, and, what have you been sort of putting into place to allow you to be able to welcome fans back?
Yeah, so I'm lucky that I work under a portfolio of companies under the Kahn family's ownership. As I mentioned, they own the Fulham Football Club. They own the Jacksonville Jaguars. They own an amphitheater called Daly's Place, which is an outdoor, fully covered but open air amphitheater. And then they own a wrestling company called All Elite Wrestling, which is a nationally televised weekly wrestling show. So we were able to start with the wrestling company welcoming fans back in. They were filming the wrestling events in our amphitheater. And we started with about a 10% capacity of selling tickets and welcoming wrestling fans in. So a very small amount. You're talking 500, 600 people. We were able to watch their behaviors. What did they do when they entered? Where did they or didn't they go? How was their food and beverage experience? Were they compliant with wearing face coverings and all of those things? So we could learn in a 600-person environment. Then we were able to host the Jacksonville Jaguars game where we had over 14,000 people in our 65,000 plus capacity stadium. And again, see how did now when you're dealing with the volume of people move. So the flow of a wrestling event is very different than the flow of a football event as far as the event itself and how people move. Now we're taking the third step, which is live music. So a country artist by the name of John Party will be performing. We will do one night with the potential to add a second show right behind it if it sells as we expect. And that will be a completely different experience because a music experience and the script of that is very different too. So all of those learnings together will allow us to keep navigating through this COVID environment and COVID world. And we hosted the first sporting event, which is the wrestling in Jacksonville. We hosted the first football game with the Jaguars, and now we'll host the first music event. And being first means nothing. It wasn't that the goal wasn't to be the first. The goal was do it when we're ready. So I'm sure you can guess that it was strategic that we did not book and announce the music event until we had the findings from the Jaguars game. We had to make sure we knew what we were going to be seeing and experiencing, and that we could execute the music event in a safe way. We debriefed on Sunday after the game. We came to a conclusion to move forward with the concert on Monday after we knew we could handle it safely, and we announced it this morning.
Fantastic. And then sort of finally, I know obviously as we've touched on there, you know, you were usually backwards and forwards to London and working with the guys at Fulham on their stadium redevelopment. You know, so how does that work? And, you know, how are you sort of tackling that, not being able to be there physically now?
So we have multiple conversations a week. Alistair McIntosh, the CEO of Fulham, Rob Padden, the head of sales for the new Fulham Pier development, and a very exciting project. So we're meeting virtually very often. We're going through the setup and sales process and technology. And, you know, to use the word technology now, that sales process will rely more on technology than ever before, because we will now be selling for next season the Fulham Pier, but have to do so in a virtual environment. And for those of you that know what a special place Craven Cottage is, and we're being right there on the Thames and being able to look out and get that emotional feeling, you're not going to be able to do that in person right now. So we're working really hard to develop that suite of products and technology to still give you that virtual experience. But I will say this, I miss London. I think it's one of the greatest cities in the world. As I mentioned, I've spent about 1 week a month for the last 5 years. And I'm really lucky that I can take a lot of learnings from there back here, and I can bring a lot of things we do here there. But they don't always cross over too. One thing I had to learn very quickly is that they don't always cross over. Here, I go get a beer and a hot dog and go back to my seat and watch the match. There, I don't do that. The all-inclusive food and beverage environment is different. But I can tell you this, both the club at Fulham and the Jaguars have this mindset. Someone was the first to do something that people thought was crazy and out of the box. Someone was the first to say, let's put the LED signage on the field, on the pitch. And people said, you're crazy, that doesn't work. And now it's standard across all of your clubs. Somebody here in the United States said, let's sell a hot dog at a football game. And now it becomes the norm. And I think right now, coming out of COVID, we're going to be forced to come up with something that seems so different and strange and so uncomfortable. But a couple years from now, we're going to say, what a great idea. It's now a normal part of our experience.
That's so true. It's we're definitely, I hope one day to make it over there and be able to experience your stadium, because it sounds amazing with the dog parks and the swimming pools and all of that. And good luck with your live music event, and keep us tuned with everything going on there at the Jaguars.
Thank you. I hope when we get to speak again, it's when I'm in London in person and can share some of the exciting things at Craven Cottage and the Fulham Pier.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chad.